May 15, 1943, Carlsbad Army Airfield, New Mexico. Entomologist Dr. Lytle S. Adams knelt in the red dirt of a makeshift testing range. His latex-gloved hand lifted a cylindrical metal canister from a cooler lined with dry ice. The canister, 15 centimeters long, 8 centimeters in diameter, weighed 450 grams, just enough to slow its fall without crushing its cargo. Inside, 20 Mexican free-tailed bats huddled, their wings folded tight against their bodies, tiny claws clinging to foam dividers. Adams twisted the canister's brass lid until it clicked, exposing a 5-centimeter fuse made of slow-burning cord. He struck a match, the flame flickering in the desert wind, and touched it to the fuse. The cord sparked orange as he tossed the canister into the air. It arced 10 meters, rotating slowly, before hitting the ground with a soft thud. The canister's spring-loaded lid popped open with a snap. The bats, dazed but unharmed, poured out in a flutter of brown wings. Each carried a tiny incendiary bomb, 15 grams of thickened napalm encased in a brass shell, attached to their chests with surgical tape. The tape was cut to 7 centimeters long, just enough to hold the bomb without restricting their flight. Within 90 seconds, the first bat landed on a wooden target structure, a 1:1 replica of a Japanese farmhouse, built from cedar planks and paper screens. It crawled into a gap under the eaves, its body pressing the bomb against the wood. The fuse burned down to the napalm. A small flame erupted, spreading across the dry planks. Adams stood, brushing dirt from his khakis, and nodded to his team. This was Project X-Ray, the Bat Bomb, and it was designed to burn Japan's cities to the ground. But by the time the war ended, it would be buried in military archives, a forgotten relic of America's most unusual World War II weapons experiments. The idea of a bat bomb was not born in a lab. It was born in a moment of frustration. On December 10, 1941, 3 days after Pearl Harbor, Dr. Adams, a wealthy Pennsylvania inventor and friend of First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, sat in his living room reading news of Japan's advance across the Pacific. He saw photos of Tokyo's neighborhoods, miles of wooden houses, paper-walled workshops, and bamboo storage sheds. These structures were tinder boxes, but conventional bombs struggled to ignite them. A single B-24 Liberator could drop 8 tons of incendiaries, but most missed their targets, falling into empty lots or waterways. Adams thought of the bats he'd seen on a trip to New Mexico. Small, agile, able to squeeze into the tiniest crevices. What if, he wondered, we used bats to carry fire? Adams spent the next 2 weeks researching bat biology. He learned that Mexican free-tailed bats, Tadera brasiliensis, were ideal. They weighed just 10 to 12 grams, could carry up to 50% of their body weight in payload, and flew 50 to 80 kilometers per night. They roost at dawn, seeking out dark, narrow spaces, exactly the gaps in Japan's wooden buildings. On January 12, 1942, he typed a 10-page letter to President Roosevelt. "Bats are nature's perfect bombers," it read. "They can deliver incendiaries to thousands of targets in a single mission. They will burn Japan's cities faster than any weapon we have." Roosevelt forwarded the letter to the War Department's Ordnance Office. Senior officers dismissed it as a crackpot idea. One general wrote in a memo, "We fight with tanks and planes, not rodents." But Adams had an ally in Eleanor Roosevelt, who urged the military to give the project a chance. In March 1942, the Army agreed to fund a $50,000 feasibility study. Adams was named project director, and a small team was assembled. 2 entomologists from the University of California, 3 engineers from the Army's Picatinny Arsenal, and a veterinarian specializing in bat care. They set up shop at Carlsbad Army Airfield, where the dry desert air was ideal for keeping bats healthy. The first challenge was capturing enough bats. Adams and his team traveled to Bracken Cave in Texas, home to 20 million Mexican free-tail bats, and set up mist nets. They worked at night when the bats returned from feeding. Each bat was carefully removed from the net, weighed, and checked for disease. Healthy bats were placed in wooden crates lined with burlap and shipped to Carlsbad. By April 1942, they had 5,000 bats in a climate control facility. The temperature was kept at 25 degrees Celsius, the humidity at 60%, conditions that mimicked the bats' natural cave habitats. They fed the bat a diet of mealworms, 10 grams per bat per day, and fresh fruit, supplemented with calcium powder to keep their bones strong. Next came the incendiary bomb. The Army's Ordnance Department designed a prototype, a brass shell 4 centimeters long, 1.5 centimeters in diameter, filled with 15 grams of napalm thickened with aluminum soap. The napalm was chosen for its ability to stick to wood and burn at 800 degrees Celsius, hot enough to ignite paper and bamboo in seconds. A fuse made of potassium nitrate and sulfur was inserted into the shell. It burned at 2 centimeters per minute, giving the bats 30 minutes to find roosts before detonation. The team tested the bomb on wooden planks. It burned for 4 minutes, creating a flame 15 centimeters tall that spread to cover a 30-centimeter circle. Perfect, Adams thought. Now they just needed to attach it to the bats. Early attempts failed. String cut into the bat skin. Glue stuck to their wings. Finally, the team settled on surgical tape. 3 MS Transport, a thin, breathable tape that didn't irritate the bat's fur. They cut the tape into 7-centimeter strips, wrapped one end around the bomb and the other around the bat's chest, just behind its wings. The bats were weighed after attachment. The bomb added 15 grams, well within their carrying capacity. In tests, the bats flew 5 kilometers without tiring, the bomb staying securely in place. The canister was the next hurdle. The bats needed to be transported to target areas without injury, then released quickly. The team's first design was a cardboard tube, but it crushed bats when dropped. They switched to aluminum, lightweight but strong, and added 20 phone-line compartments, one for each bat. A spring-loaded lid was installed. When the canister hit the ground, the lid popped open, releasing the bats. But the canister fell too fast, stunning the bats. The team added a tiny parachute, 60 centimeters in diameter, made of silk, attached to the top of the canister. The parachute slowed the fall to 3 meters per second, gentle enough for the bats to remain conscious. If you found this interesting, give a thumbs up to show your support. Drop "Oh, wonderful" in the comments to let me know you're still with me. Stick around till the end, because I'll reveal 3 mind-blowing facts you won't want to miss. Haven't followed yet? Hit that follow button so you won't miss our next deep dive. Trust me, the best is yet to come. The first full test was held on October 10th, 1942, at Carlsbad. The team built a mock Japanese village, 10 cedar houses, a paper screen workshop, and a bamboo storage shed. They loaded 200 bats into 10 canisters, each marked with a number to track which bats went where. A Piper Cub aircraft flew 1,500 meters above the village and dropped the canisters. The parachutes opened, and the canisters drifted down. When they hit the ground, the lids popped open. The bats fluttered out, most flying to the nearest building. 30 minutes later, the first bomb detonated. A flame erupted on the workshop's roof. Within 45 minutes, 8 of the 10 houses were on fire. The storage shed collapsed into a pile of burning bamboo. The test was a success, but there was a problem. 3 bats had flown 2 kilometers away and roosted in a farmer's barn. The barn burned to ground. The Army paid the farmer $200 in damages, an early sign of the bat bomb's unpredictability. By early 1943, Project X-Ray had grown. The Army increased funding to $500,000, and the team expanded to 50 people: bat handlers, engineers, fuse specialists, and a full-time veterinarian. They built a new facility at Muroc Army Airfield, now Edwards Air Force Base, in California, with 10 bat enclosures, each 10 meters long, 5 meters wide, equipped with heat lamps and roosting boxes. The enclosures were surrounded by 2-meter fences to prevent bats from escaping. Workers wore latex gloves and face masks to avoid spreading disease, and the enclosures were disinfected daily with a dilute bleach solution. Scaling up brought new problems. In February 1943, a virus swept through the bat colony. Symptoms included lethargy, loss of appetite, and respiratory distress. The veterinarian identified it as bat influenza, a highly contagious virus that killed 20% of infected bats. The team isolated the sick bats in a separate enclosure, gave them electrolyte solutions via syringe, and added vitamin C to the drinking water of the healthy bats. It took 3 weeks to contain the outbreak, but 1,200 bats died. Adams ordered a review of biosecurity protocols. From then on, all new bats were quarantined for 14 days before joining the main colony. The fuse also needed refinement. In wet weather, the potassium nitrate fuse absorbed moisture and extinguished. The Ordnance Department coated the fuse with a waterproof lacquer, nitrocellulose dissolved in acetone, that prevented water damage. They tested the new fuse in a rain simulator. It burned steadily even after being sprayed with water for 10 minutes. But the lacquer made the fuse burn 5 minutes faster. The team adjusted the release time, dropping the canisters 5 minutes earlier to give the bats enough time to roost. Mass-producing the canisters was another challenge. The Army contracted with the Detroit Metal Products Company to build 10,000 canisters. The factory, which normally made auto parts, struggled with the canister's precision. The foam dividers had to be cut to 2-millimeter tolerance to fit the bats, and the spring-loaded lid needed to pop open with exactly 10 pounds of force. The first batch of 1,000 canisters had faulty lids. 30% didn't open on impact. The factory retooled its stamping machines, adding a stronger spring, and the next batch worked perfectly. Each canister now costs $3.50 to make, more than the Army had budgeted, but worth it for reliability. In July 1943, the Army Air Forces AAF became involved. The AAF was tasked with delivering the bat bomb, and they modified B-29 Superfortress bombers to carry the canisters. Each B-29's bomb bay was fitted with 10 aluminum racks, each holding 100 canisters. The racks were angled at 15 degrees to ensure the canisters fell clear of the bomber's wings. The canisters were loaded by hand, each secured with a metal clip. The AAF tested the modified B-29 at Muroc in August 1943. The canisters dropped correctly, but turbulence from the bomber's engines killed 5% of the bats. The team added a foam buffer to the racks, reducing deaths to 2%. The biggest test came on March 12, 1944, at WWII Proving Ground in Utah. The Army built a full-scale mock Japanese city, 100 cedar houses, each with a thatched roof, 5 small factories made of wood and corrugated iron, a railway station, and a market square. All were built using blueprints captured from Japanese military archives. The team loaded 20,000 bats into 1,000 canisters, each labeled with a color-coded tag to track which part of the city they targeted. Two B-29s took off at 4:30 a.m., flying at 3,000 meters, low enough for the parachutes to deploy, high enough to avoid ground fire. They dropped the canisters over the mock city. The results were devastating. Within 30 minutes, the first bombs detonated. Flames erupted across the city, spreading from house to house. The paper screens acted as kindling, and the thatched roofs burned in minutes. The factory's wooden supports collapsed, and the railway station's roof caved in. By 7 a.m., 85 of the 100 houses were destroyed, and 4 of the 5 factories were in ruins. The Army's fire crew, 10 men with hoses, could not contain the blaze. The Test Range's supervisor, Colonel John H. Porter, wrote in his report, "Project X-ray is more effective than any incendiary weapon we have. A single B-29 could start 20,000 fires in Tokyo." But the war was shifting. By 1944, the AAF had developed the M69 incendiary bomb, a 45-gram device filled with napalm and magnesium. The M69 was smaller than earlier incendiaries, and a single B-29 could carry 1,200 of them. It was also cheaper. Each M69 cost $1.50, compared to $3.50 for a bat canister, plus the cost of caring for the bats. The M69 was tested in June 1944 over Berlin, and it worked, starting fires that burned 2 square kilometers of the city. The AAF began to question why it needed the bat bomb. Another issue was timing. Bats roost at dawn, so the bat bomb had to be dropped at first light. But the AAF preferred to bomb at night, when Japanese anti-aircraft guns were less accurate. Bats would not fly at night. They relied on daylight to navigate, and dropping the canisters at night meant the bats would huddle in the canisters until dawn, increasing the risk of injury. General Henry H. Arnold, commander of the AAF, summed it up in a memo. "The bat bomb is a clever trick, but it doesn't fit our tactics. We bomb at night. Bats fly by day. It's that simple." In April 1944, the War Department ordered a formal review of Project X-ray. A panel of 12 experts, including scientists from MIT, Army officers, and AAF planners, evaluated the project over 2 weeks. They analyzed test data, cost reports, and tactical plans. Their final report, released in May 1944, was mixed. Project X-ray is technically feasible. It can start more fires per mission than conventional incendiaries. However, it is 5 times more expensive, requires specialized training for crews, and relies on a living organism that is unpredictable. Given the availability of the M69 incendiary, we recommend canceling the project. Adams fought to save it. He met with Secretary of War Henry Stimson in June 1944, arguing that the bat bomb could target small Japanese cities, like Kagoshima or Hiroshima, that were too small for large B-29 raids. He offered to cut costs by using wild bats captured in Japan via parachute drops of cages, instead of captive ones. He even proposed a limited test mission. Drop 1,000 bats on a small Japanese town to prove its effectiveness. But Stimson was not convinced. The atomic bomb project, Manhattan, was already underway, and it promised a quicker end to the war. On July 1st, 1944, the War Department canceled Project X-ray. The team at Muroc was given 30 days to shut down. They released the remaining 18,000 bats back into the wild. most in Bracken Cave, some in New Mexico's Carlsbad Caverns. The canisters were melted down for scrap aluminum, and the incendiary bombs were destroyed in a controlled detonation. Adams packed his files into boxes and returned to Pennsylvania. He never worked on weapons again. In a letter to a colleague in 1945, he wrote, "We had something that could have ended the war without killing hundreds of thousands, but no one wanted to listen. Bats are too quiet, I suppose. They don't make a big noise like a bomb." The bat bomb might have faded into obscurity if not for a single file found in 1960 by a historian at the National Archives. The file labeled Project X-Ray, Bat Bomb 1942 to 1944, contained test reports, photos, and Adams' original letter to Roosevelt. It was declassified in 1970, and the story of the bat bomb began to spread. Today, there is a small exhibit at the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force in Dayton, Ohio, a bat canister, a dummy incendiary bomb, a photo of the WWII mock city, and a handwritten note from Adams. Nature gave us a perfect weapon. We just didn't use it. The legacy of Project X-Ray is more than a curiosity. It taught the military valuable lessons about biological weapons and unconventional warfare. The techniques used to handle and transport bats, climate control, quarantine protocols, stress reduction, later influenced how the Army handled other animals, including pigeons used for messaging and dogs used for mine detection. The bat bomb's fuse design, with its waterproof coating, was adapted for use in naval mines, and the idea of using living organisms to deliver payloads paved the way for modern drone technology. Small, agile devices that can access tight spaces, just like Adams' bats. For the Mexican free-tailed bats, the project had little long-term impact. The bats released from Muroc joined wild colonies, and their descendants still live in Bracken Cave and Carlsbad Caverns. Each night at dusk, millions of them fly out to hunt insects, a spectacle that draws tourists from around the world. No one knows which of them carry the genes of the bat bombers of World War II, but when they roost in the eaves of buildings, they're a quiet reminder of the weapon that almost was. The bat bomb story is a study in innovation and practicality. It was a brilliant idea, using nature's own design to solve a military problem. It was effective. It was relatively humane compared to the atomic bomb, and it could have saved lives by avoiding a ground invasion of Japan. But it was too unusual, too slow to develop, and too dependent on a creature that couldn't be controlled. In the end, it was overtaken by simpler, more destructive weapons. As Dr. Adams once said, the bat bomb didn't fail because it didn't work. It failed because it was too different. People trust machines more than animals, even when the animal is better at the job. Today, that lesson still resonates. In an era of drones and AI, we still struggle to embrace ideas that don't fit our expectations. But the bat bomb remains a testament to the ingenuity of those who dare to think differently, even if their idea never made it to the battlefield.